Greetings, friends, and welcome to another episode of Countdown to His Coming. Hey, thanks for joining me. Craig Bailey coming to you from Chesney, South Carolina. But from this tiny little town, we're exploring the things in the Bible that point us not only to the second coming of the Lord Jesus Christ, but to events happening all around us every day. I'm recording this on the 14th day of October 2023. We're living in a time like no other, and we've been watching events unfold in the Middle East with this attack on Israel by Hamas that once again brings up the question, who is the final Antichrist or Antichrists that are going to come on the scene? And could they possibly be connected to Islam? Now, that flies in the face of the bad Marvel comic Left Behind series. It seems to think that this is all centered on Europe. But friends, when you read Bible prophecy, you've got to understand it's centered on Jerusalem. It's not centered anywhere else in the world. It does talk about events happening in the world, but it's all about God's land, about Israel, and it's about Jerusalem. Now, with that thought in mind, this morning just checked on a couple of the folks that we keep up with in the Middle East. One of those, if you're not already following him, is Amir Safari, who we were able to watch from his home in Galilee with Israeli jets flying overhead, fighter jets, catching us up on what's been going on over there. He's been talking about how Israeli special forces have been raiding northern Gaza. And already we're seeing the media attempts now to say that Hamas is just a group that are like Nazis. They are different. No, these are not regular Muslims, and they have nothing to do with Islam. They're bad people, and yes, let's root them out, but most everybody else within Islam is just wonderful. Palestinians are good, oppressed people. Those good, oppressed people keep voting terrorist organizations into control of all the areas in which they live. So this is true of the Palestinian Liberation Movement, of Hezbollah, of Hamas, of all of these others that we have mentioned. So there's something going on here that's a lot deeper. Could it be because the foundational religion of this region is more connected with Antichrist than you would want to believe? Remember, to become a Muslim, you have to basically make a declaration that Christianity is false, to say that God has no son. The foundation of Christianity is that God so loved the world, he sent his son. You can never make those two religions, as long as they hold on to their own fundamental beliefs, you can never meld them together into anything, because in their basics, they are diametrically opposed to one another. And so we have what may be the most clear reason why this conflict continues. You have a religion that has taught hatred of Christians and Jews from its founding, and the more fundamental people get in the Islamic religion, the more likely they are to carry out heinous acts like we have seen over this past week. Well, the problem seems to be religion, as Safari talks about. Islam, the more fundamental and more faithful you become, the more likely that you will want to kill infidels. Now, in the interrogation of one of those captured terrorists, they were told, we were instructed to inflict as much terror as possible. Yes, go after the elderly, go after the young, go after the women. Intentionally rape the women because you're supposed to make them dirty, he said. These are the kind of things that terrorists do. And this is what they were instructed to do when they invaded southern Israel just this time last week. Now, when we're looking at the passage that we're talking about from Revelation chapter 6, we see first a conqueror going out to conquer on a white horse, but what follows him is a red horse of war, hostility, death, and destruction, another black horse that talks about the famine and destruction that follows, and then a final horse, a green horse, and the rider that sits on him was named Death and Hades. What more vivid description could you have of what's been actually happening this week in Israel? Literally death and hell following the green horse of Islam, the primary color of Islam, all over southern Israel. You say, well, is there anyone else that believes this, Craig? Or are you just the only idiot in the world believing this? I want to call your attention to an author you may not have heard of. His name is Joel Richardson. He's written quite a few books. He was raised in the United States and trained here, but has spent years in the Middle East. And of the things that he has done while over there, he has extensively studied Islam, its basics, its foundational documents, its religion from one end to the other, to see exactly what they believe. And he's written several interesting books. One you might be interested in is The Islamic Antichrist, one that talks about how, in his viewpoint, the final Antichrist, the one that really at the head of this beast conglomeration, might just be a Muslim. Another one that he's written is entitled The Mideast Beast. Now, this would perhaps by identifying an antichrist as a beast, we mess up. And a lot of Christian writers do that these days when they get to Revelation 13. They call the beast a person. You can't mix your metaphors in Scripture. Daniel saw a beast. It's the same beast that John sees in the book of Revelation. It's a beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. It's a beast that exercises its control all over the world. This beast is an empire, it's not a person. But at the head of that empire are many persons, and you could call every one of them an antichrist. As John pointed out, many antichrists, plural, have gone out into the world. But there's one in particular that Daniel noticed that also pops up in Revelation 13. There's a little horn. The horns are the people. I have a series on the horns of the Antichrist. I said there's one horn we're waiting to see revealed, and that's the one that's going to be referred to by Islamic religion as the Mahdi, the one who's coming at the end to lead the final war against Christians and Jews and finally establish Islam as the worldwide religion. And so at the head of this, remember, the horns are the actual people that are influencing end-time events, the ones that have control over the planet. Among these horns, a little horn rises up. Now the question is, that little horn that most would call the Antichrist, the ultimate Antichrist, is that person a blue-eyed Western European, or is that person perhaps a Muslim? It's a good question. Now, when Joel Richardson deals with this, I'm going to read to you just some of his preface in the book, The Mideast Beast, because you need to grasp this truth. For the most part, Christianity has likened itself unto a blind spectator trying to ignore Islam, its history, its background, and what it's done in the world, even though it has massacred millions of Jews and Christians through the years. Now, in his preface to this particular book, he writes, "The Islamic Antichrist," which is the other book I showed you, set the biblical basis for an end-time narrative side by side with the Islamic vision of the end times. Now, the resultant picture brings to light the shocking reality that a religious system, Islam, is antichrist to its very core. Islam's basic doctrines represent a direct frontal attack against Christianity, declaring many of those doctrines the Bible sets forth as holy, fundamental, and essential to be the greatest abominations and blasphemies imaginable. Whereas the Christian faith is founded upon the belief that God himself became a man in Jesus the Messiah, Islam declares in its Quran that anyone who believes in the incarnation commits the worst form of blasphemy imaginable, is cursed by Allah, and will suffer a grievous penalty in this life and in the next. Now, beyond this, Islam's end-time narrative is in so many ways simply the biblical end-time story flipped on its head. While the whole book can't be summarized here, here's a couple of examples of how this picture is painted for us. Listen to what he says. First, the biblical descriptions regarding the coming of Jesus, the Jewish Messiah, bears many striking resemblances to the coming Antichrist of Islam. whom Muslims refer to as the counterfeit Messiah. Second, the Bible's Antichrist bears numerous striking commonalities with the primary Messiah figure of Islam, who Muslims identify as the Mahdi, spelled Mahdi. And in other words, our Messiah is their Antichrist, our Antichrist is their Messiah. Even more shocking to many readers was the revelation that Islam teaches that when Jesus returns, he will come back as a Muslim prophet whose primary mission will be to abolish Christianity. Now, it's difficult for any Bible believer to hear about these things without becoming acutely aware of the satanic origins of the Islamic religion. Now, there's much more that he has to say. I would encourage you to grab some of these and read up on them to get the background. I was watching an interview with him on someone else's program just the other day where he talks about this version of the end times that's being promoted by all these fundamentalist Muslims. Now, after being raised in the U.S., he's had so much experience loving folks that are not Christians, including Muslims, and presenting Christ to them, praying for them. He's not saying we should take up arms and shoot them all. No, that's not what he's saying. Instead, he's saying we should, as Jesus told us to do, carry the good news of the gospel to everyone in the world while we can. And he says, many good Palestinians, some of which are even Christians, many Muslims are all caught in the middle of this struggle. But it goes back to some of those basic beliefs of Islam, and those are summarized by some of these strongest groups within the religion that believe Muhammad's version of the end times. They're looking for a final messianic figure, an imam that is coming that will bring all of these Muslim nations together for one prophetic purpose: destroy the nation of Israel. And if you want to discover just how deep this gets, listen to one of the particular prophecies in Islamic writings, the prophecy of the Garkar tree. It's said that Muslims will fight against the Jews until there are only a few left. And then, hiding behind trees and rocks, they'll have the trees and rocks actually speak. And here's what they say. I'm quoting this directly from their writings. "O faithful Muslim, there's a Jew hiding behind me. Come and kill him." Really? Yeah, this is what many Muslims are looking forward to. The death of Jews and Christians, a slaughter of those enemies of Allah that they think is going to usher in the ultimate kingdom when Islam will rule the earth. Well, how else can you picture what's happening with the four horsemen of the apocalypse? A kingdom that rides across the earth trying to impose itself everywhere. And many Americans had no idea just how powerful this was until this past weekend. Oh, you weren't surprised to see people in the parliament in Iran, in Tehran, its capital, standing up and screaming death to Israel and kill the Jews. They do that all the time. So you probably think they're on the other side of the world, don't have to worry about them. And to see protests happening in cities where Muslim capitals might have people showing up and saying death to Israel and the great Satan America, you weren't surprised at that. But what did you think about folks showing up in front of the Sydney Opera House in Australia? Police told Jews, please stay home. Don't get out on the streets. It could be dangerous for you. And there they were chanting and screaming support for Hamas and for Palestinians and death to the Jews. In Australia? How about in New York City, where all of a sudden we have parades of people in support of Hamas, showing up, clamoring for things like, well, free Palestine. Free Palestine? That's your response to the killing of babies and women and the elderly and the attack that took place? That's perhaps the worst thing that's happened to Jews since the Holocaust. That was your response? Yeah. Did you see the Muslims standing up in the middle of New York City screaming out that there is only one true religion? It is Islam, and it will take over Manhattan and Queens and Brooklyn, and basically saying, we're here not to ever surrender and submit to your American values. We're here to make Islam the religion of the USA. Really? This has been repeated over and over across the West. Where did these people come from? Well, aside from coming into our nation through an open, porous southern border, they've been coming in legally for a long time, not to assimilate into American culture, but to convert it. And when we see this happening all over the world, we begin to see that there is a much bigger strategy in mind here. Famously, Muammar Gaddafi once said that he would conquer Europe, Islam would conquer Europe, that is, with the wombs of its Muslim women, because they will have children while these Westerners decide you're not supposed to have children, and we will basically enter your gates, enter all of your cities, and we will outnumber you eventually. We will take over. And it seems like this mentality of we will conquer has something that's been there from the very beginning, from even the days in which Jerusalem was first conquered by 638 AD by Muslim invaders. It's the same image that has been presented over and over and over and used to justify things, just like the Armenian genocide that happened between the years 1915 and 1923 or so, as Ottoman Turks, faithful Muslims, destroyed so many people, over 1 million killed in Armenia, that today not even half of all the Armenians in the world actually live in Armenia. They were scattered. It reminds you of the scattering of the Jews to the nations, attacked because they were just the ultimate enemy. They were Christians that refused to convert in the middle of an Islamic nation. And as we look at how this has spread through the centuries, what amazes me is that so many people in the church just don't even want to look at it. Matter of fact, this idea that there can somehow be a Chrislam, a melding of our religions together, that we may peacefully coexist. That is such a lie from Satan that to even entertain it means that you are ignorant of what's gone on in the past and what's going on right now. You cannot combine these two religions. There is no way that they mix any more than they can mix with Judaism, because their beliefs are at complete opposite poles. These people may agree to live at peace within the same communities, but they won't agree to mix their worship. They will never agree to somehow praise a God in which they don't believe, especially a God that demands their destruction. Well, this is where we are today, my friends, standing at the crossroads of history, watching it unfold before our eyes. And as we see these Antichrist figures, the horns of the beast, pop up all around us, we are reminded that the Bible gave us their pattern. And that's what I see in the four horsemen of the apocalypse. A pattern that has been laid out and repeated over and over through history, not one we're expecting to just pop up all of a sudden after the rapture of the church. But it's one that's taking place right in front of our eyes. But the promise of Scripture says that of that final horse, when he's revealed, it says that what's going to happen is these will be given control, authority over a fourth of the earth. That's scary that a fourth of the earth will succumb to these things, but it's also a promise that says, hey, yes, we can survive and endure even to the end and resist these enemies of the cross, and they will only be able to exploit the world up to a fourth of its population. They will never control it all. That's a promise you can stand on right now in these desperate days. But it also says that there's something else happening here. And wherever this kingdom goes with its key colors, then you can expect death and destruction to follow. Again, I would recommend that you check out a website called thereligionofpeace.com, where it will show you exactly what the fundamental beliefs in Islam, the religion of Antichrist, actually do around the world on a regular basis. As people who have these beliefs continue to not only kill Jews and Christians, not only kill people like Hindus and others that oppose them, but will even kill those in their own religion who don't line up with what they want. You see, yesterday in Afghanistan, a minority group that had a particular mosque in Afghanistan suffered the loss of 7 who were killed, another 15 injured, in a suicide bomber blast from another person in another group of Muslims that says their group is more important than yours. Now I'm talking about the typical Sunni Shiite controversy within Islam. There are other groups within Islam that fight each other, and their beliefs seem to be pretty consistent. We're willing to kill our enemies to make our point. And we expect to be blessed and somehow granted special treatment in heaven if we are martyred in that kind of way. Friends, these are beliefs, false beliefs, that will drive a whole group of people over the cliff like a herd of lemmings to their own destruction as they've embraced false doctrine. They've embraced satanic doctrine. And their whole idea is the more of us they can take with them, the more blessed they will be in this imaginary eternity that will follow. That will somehow say, oh, you are such a faithful follower of Allah. You have killed so many infidels to arrive here. Oh, please, there are 75 virgins over here just waiting for you. This is the life that you've got that's been paid for by your faithful martyrdom in Islam. It sounds ludicrous, but that's exactly what's taking place within the faith of Islam today. I know there are many Muslims that reject that, and more power to you. And many Muslims try to make their particular religion today more peaceful. Good luck with that. It doesn't seem to be working, especially in Israel today. Well, listen, I've babbled long enough. God bless you. Thanks for spending some time with me. In our next countdown to his coming, we're going to show you how there's a different parallel to the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse outside the Muslim world, one that especially is affecting those of us in the United States of America and other Western countries. We'll see you next time when we deal with that. But in the meantime, you worship with God's people somewhere this weekend. Draw strength from praising the Lord with the people of the Lord and share the good news of the gospel while you still can. God bless you. I'll see you next time.